Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a fascinating stack of sources that might seem, at first glance, a little fundamentally about words themselves.
Indeed. Our source material for this particular deep dive comes from a dictionary, specifically a section dedicated to synonyms and antonyms.
Right.
It's not just a list, though. It's like a linguistic expedition, revealing the subtle but crucial distinctions that give language its depth and power.
That's exactly it. Our mission today is to act as your guides through these definitions, really pulling out the most important nuggets of knowledge. We're looking for those aha moments that show us how words that might seem interchangeable on the surface actually carry entirely different weights, different connotations or implications.
Absolutely.
Think of this as your shortcut to becoming incredibly well-informed about how choosing just the right word can completely change the meaning, the feeling, and the impact of what you say or write. We'll be focusing primarily on words, starting with the letter C from our source, exploring how these synonyms help us describe everything from our inner states to our interactions, the quality of things, and even how we handle information. Get ready to look at familiar words with fresh eyes. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's dive in. We'll be exploring groups of words that cluster around concepts like quietude, troubled states, confidence, attention to detail, social behavior, quality, crowds.
A lot of C words.
A lot of C words, yes. Summarizing information, brevity, and verifying claims. And what's particularly insightful about this source, I think, is how it uses specific terms within the definitions themselves. Terms like implies, suggests, and stresses.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Paying attention to those is really key to unlocking the nuance. Implies often points to a consequence or maybe a common association, not necessarily the core meaning.
Okay.
Suggests might hint at a possible interpretation or perhaps a secondary meaning, while stresses tells us, okay, this is a core defining feature or emphasis of the word.
Yeah.
Understanding how the dictionary makers use these indicators helps us read the definitions more effectively and truly grasp the subtle differences.
That's a great point. It's like learning the dictionary's own shorthand for nuance. It tells us not just what a word means, but how it means it, or sort of what comes along with its meaning.
Exactly.
Okay, let's start then with how we describe quiet or, a lack of disturbance. We have words like calm, tranquil, serene, placid, peaceful. On the surface, they all kind of mean not agitated, right? But the dictionary shows there's much more to it.
Absolutely. The source's breakdown of these words is just a prime example of that hidden complexity. Let's start with calm.
Okay, calm. The definition for calm in our source tells us it often implies a contrast with a foregoing or nearby state of agitation or violence.
Right.
The example given is the protests ended and the streets were calm again. And the antonyms listed are stormy or agitated.
So the core idea here isn't just quietness itself, but quietness that follows or is in opposition to turmoil. It's peace as a result of something stopping or settling down. Think about a storm at sea. After it passes, the waters become calm.
Right.
Or maybe a heated argument ending, leading to a period of calm discussion. It's defined by what came before it, or maybe what it's preventing.
So it feels like a state that's achieved or returned to, often maybe out of necessity or relief. How does that differ from tranquil?
Well, tranquil, according to the source, suggests a deep quietude or composure. The example is the tranquil beauty of a formal garden, and the antonym is troubled.
That definition feels different. Deep quietude. That suggests something inherent, maybe more natural or pervasive. Like a garden isn't tranquil because it stopped being agitated. It just is tranquil.
Precisely. While calm is peace after or away from agitation, tranquil suggests an underlying settled state of peace or composure. It's less about contrast and more about the intrinsic nature of the subject. A tranquil mind isn't just calm after stress. It possesses, a fundamental state of peace.
I see.
And the antonym troubled implies a disruption of that inherent state rather than just a contrast to external agitation.
That distinction is really useful. Okay, so calm is the post-agitation state. Tranquil is the settled, natural state of peace. What about serene?
Serene stresses an unclouded and lofty tranquility. The example used is a woman of serene beauty.
Unclouded and lofty. Wow, that adds layers. So it's not just quiet, it's clear, elevated, perhaps even a kind of radiant peace. A serene person seems somehow untouched by worldly troubles, possessing a higher, clearer kind of peace.
Exactly. Serene elevates the concept of tranquility. It suggests a clarity of mind or spirit that accompanies the peace, a state that feels pure and perhaps inspiring, sort of separate from petty disturbances.
Like tranquility with an inner light.
Yeah, or an elevated perspective. That's a good way to put it.
Moving on to placid. The source says it suggests lack of excitement or agitation and an equable temper, but importantly, the definition notes it may imply a degree of complacency. The examples leading a very placid existence, antonym, choleric.
And this is where the word takes a bit of a turn, doesn't it? While describing a calm surface or an even temper, that possibility of complacency introduces a potential negative connotation.
Right.
A placid lake is calm, sure, but a placid life might lack depth or challenge or engagement. It describes a state that is undisturbed, but perhaps too undisturbed, lacking vigor or strong feeling.
So, calling someone serene sounds aspirational, maybe, but calling their existence placid could be quite critical, suggesting passivity or even dullness. It's a peaceful state, but maybe not a desirable one in all contexts.
Just so. The antonym choleric highlights the equable temple aspect. Placid is the opposite of being easily angered or agitated, but that potential for complacency means it's a state to be assessed carefully.
Okay. And finally, peaceful. Our source says this implies a state of repose, often in contrast with or following strife or turmoil. The example is a former firebrand grown peaceful in his old age. The antonym is turbulent.
So, like calm, peaceful also connects the current state of quiet to a prior disturbance, right? But peaceful often implies a more fundamental resolution of conflict, either external or internal.
Oh.
It's the state that arises after significant struggle or discord has ended. That former firebrand example captures this beautifully. Someone whose life was perhaps full of conflict has finally found internal peace.
That makes sense. Calm feels like a temporary state after agitation, maybe, while peaceful feels more like a settled, lasting state achieved after significant strife. So when you look at this whole group, calm, tranquil, serene, placid, peaceful together, what does it really tell you about how English describes quiet? It's not just not loud or not upset, is it?
Absolutely not. This group reveals that our language encodes not just the absence of disturbance, but the nature, the origin, and the quality of that quietude. You know, is it peace after a storm, like calm or peaceful? Is it an inherent deep quiet, like tranquil? Is it an elevated, clear state, serene? Or is it a state of settledness that might lack dynamism, placid? The specific word choice gives us crucial information about the context and character of the stillness being described.
Yeah.
It reflects a need, I think, to differentiate these subtle experiences of being undisturbed.
It really highlights how much meaning is packed into these seemingly similar words. You can see how using serene to describe a person is totally different from using placid to describe their life, evoking completely different feelings and judgment.
Precisely, and that precision allows for richer, more accurate communication about complex states of being.
Okay, let's shift then from internal states of quiet to, well, their opposite states of troubled feeling. We use words like care, concern, solicitude, anxiety, worry when we feel uneasy. How does our source differentiate these?
Here, the dictionary distinguishes these troubled states based on the source and the nature of the trouble itself. Let's start with care.
Okay, care. The source says care implies oppression of the mind by responsibility or apprehension. The example description is a face worn by a host of cares. The antonym listed is careless, which, okay, while linked to careful, it points to the idea that care involves a burden that demands attention.
Right. So care here is tied directly to burdens, responsibilities, or specific fears that weigh heavily on someone's mind. It's the feeling of being burdened or oppressed by the demands or dangers you face. It's a personal weight. Think of someone burdened by financial cares or the cares of managing a difficult project.
It's the weight you carry. Okay. How does that compare to concern?
Concern implies a troubled state and the interest, relation, affection, or responsibility that produces it. The example is, your happiness is my only concern. The antonym is unconcern.
So concern ties the troubled feeling to something or someone outside of yourself. It's trouble that stems from being invested in or connected to something external. My concern for your happiness arises because I care about you.
Exactly. The troubled feeling is a result of your connection to something or someone else. It's trouble driven by relationship, interest, or a sense of responsibility towards something or someone.
Got it. What about solicitude?
Solicitude implies great concern or apprehension and connotes either thoughtful or hovering attentiveness. The example is behaved with typical maternal solicitude. The antonyms are neglectfulness and unmindfulness.
So solicitude sounds like an intensified concern, often with a very active, perhaps even slightly anxious, focus on the object of that concern. The maternal solicitude example makes sense. It's a deep, often protective, and highly attentive form of concern.
Precisely. It's concern taken to a higher degree, marked by a strong attentiveness that can feel protective or even slightly overbearing, hence the word hovering.
Right.
It emphasizes the active nature of this intense concern.
Okay. Next, anxiety. This word is used a lot these days.
It is. Anxiety stresses anguished uncertainty or fear of misfortune or failure. The example is being plagued by anxiety and self-doubt. The antonym is security.
That feels very focused on the future and potential negative outcomes. It's fear or distress about what might happen, particularly potential bad luck or not succeeding.
Yes, the key elements here are uncertainty and that forward-looking fear, specifically about misfortune or failure. It's a state of distress stemming from anticipating bad future events. The lack of security mentioned in the antonym really highlights this future-oriented fear.
And finally, worry.
Worry suggests prolonged fretting over matters that may or may not be real cause for anxiety. The example is a businessman's endless list of worries.
This definition points out that worry can be less grounded in reality. It's the act of dwelling on troubles, but they might be hypothetical, minor, or even imagined.
Exactly. While anxiety is tied to significant potential misfortune or failure, worry suggests a state of persistent, often unproductive mental preoccupation over potential problems, regardless of their likelihood or severity.
Right.
It can be a state of internal churning about things that may never materialize.
Looking at these together, care, concern, solicitude, anxiety, worry. It's clear that our troubled thoughts manifest in different ways depending on their source and focus. Care is a personal burden. Concern is trouble stemming from connection. Solicitude is intense, active concern. Anxiety is fear of future misfortune. And worry is dwelling on potential problems, real or not.
It's a rich vocabulary for describing distress, isn't it? Understanding these distinctions helps us accurately identify and communicate the specific nature of our unease.
Yeah.
Are we experiencing the care of responsibility, the concern for a loved one, the intense solicitude of a caregiver, the future-focused anxiety of potential failure, or the perhaps unproductive worry about things outside our control? The words provide a framework for analyzing the trouble itself.
That brings a lot of clarity to internal states that often feel jumbled together. Okay, so from internal feelings, let's transition to how people present themselves externally, particularly when under pressure or faced with opportunity.
A natural progression. Let's examine words describing demeanor related to confidence and control. Confidence, assurance, self-possession, aplomb. These all relate to appearing capable or composed, but they aren't quite the same thing.
Let's start with confidence.
Our source stresses that confidence means faith in oneself and one's powers without any suggestion of conceit or arrogance. The example given is the confidence that comes only from long experience. The antonym is diffidence.
This sounds like the ideal, doesn't it? A positive, earned belief in one's abilities, rooted in experience, and importantly, free from arrogance.
Yes, the definition explicitly excludes conceit. It's a well-founded trust in one's capabilities. How does that compare to assurance?
Assurance carries a stronger implication of certainty and may suggest arrogance or lack of objectivity in assessing one's own powers. The example is moving among guests with great assurance. Antonyms are diffidence and alarm.
Okay, here's a critical difference. While confidence is faith without arrogance, assurance can imply a greater degree of certainty, which might cross the line into arrogance or maybe an unrealistic assessment of one's own abilities.
Right.
Someone with assurance appears certain, but that certainty might not be fully grounded in objective reality or earned experience.
So you could have assurance without genuine, humble confidence. It's the outward show of certainty, which can be impressive, but potentially off-putting or even misguided.
Exactly. What about self-possession?
Self-possession reflects perfect self-control and command of one's powers. The example is when someone answered the insolent question with complete self-possession. Antonyms are discomposed and anxious.
This feels less about inherent ability and more about maintaining internal control and composure, especially when challenged or provoked. It's about keeping your cool under fire.
Yes, exactly. The focus shifts from belief in ability to maintaining control over oneself and one's reactions, particularly when faced with difficult or trying circumstances. It's inner stability under pressure.
Got it. And finally, aplomb.
Aplomb implies a manifest self-possession in trying or challenging situations. The example is handling the horde of reporters with great aplomb. The antonym is shyness.
So aplomb is self-possession, but specifically shown or demonstrated in public or difficult situations.
Yeah.
It's not just having inner control, but projecting it outwardly when the stakes are high.
Precisely. It's the outward performance of composure and confidence when faced with external pressure, scrutiny, or challenge. Someone with aplomb doesn't just feel in control, they appear in control, especially when others might falter.
This group gives us a really interesting spectrum of how people project capability. Confidence is the internal, humble belief.
Right.
Assurance is the outward show of certainty, which might be warranted or maybe arrogant. Self-possession is maintaining inner control under pressure. And aplomb is demonstrating that control outwardly in demanding situations.
They paint different portraits of someone's demeanor. Describing someone as having confidence is a clear positive. Saying they have assurance might subtly hint at a potential flaw. Calling them self-possessed highlights their inner strength and control, while aplomb speaks to their ability to handle public pressure with grace. These distinctions help us understand not just if someone seems capable, but how and why they appear that way.
That's incredibly insightful. Moving from descriptions of character, let's look at how we describe attention to detail. Are careful, meticulous, scrupulous, punctilious just synonyms for being thorough? Our source says no.
Another set where the motivation and focus behind the attention to detail are key differentiators. Let's start with the most common term, careful.
Careful implies great concern for persons or matters in charge, and attentiveness and cautiousness in avoiding mistakes. The example is a careful worker. The antonym is careless.
So careful is the foundational level of diligence. It's driven by a desire to avoid errors, or maybe a sense of responsibility for what is being handled. It's about basic attentiveness and caution in execution.
Right, it's about diligence in preventing errors. What about meticulous?
Meticulous may imply either extreme carefulness or a finicky caution over small points. The example is meticulous scholarship.
So meticulous takes careful to an extreme degree, but that extreme can be seen positively, like thoroughness in scholarship, or potentially negatively, like fussiness or excessive caution over minor details.
Exactly. The context is crucial here. Meticulous implies intense attention to detail, which can be highly valued in some fields, but might also suggest an unnecessary or obsessive focus on trivial matters in others.
Okay. Next is scrupulous.
Scrupulous applies to what is proper, fitting, or ethical. The example is scrupulous honesty. The antonym is remiss.
This is a very different driving force for attention to detail, isn't it? It's not just about avoiding mistakes or being thorough. It's about adhering to moral or ethical standards in the details.
Precisely. A scrupulous person pays attention to details because those details touch upon matters of right and wrong, fairness, or ethical conduct.
Yeah.
Their diligence is morally motivated.
Think of a scrupulous accountant who wouldn't dream of bending rules, even minor ones, if it felt dishonest.
That adds a layer of integrity to the concept of being detail-oriented and punctilious.
Punctilious implies minute, even excessive attention to fine points. The example is punctilious observance of ritual.
This sounds like attention to detail driven by rules, formalities, or even potentially trivial conventions.
Yes, it often relates to strict adherence to procedures, etiquette, or formal requirements, sometimes to an excessive degree. A punctilious host might insist on a specific seating arrangement purely based on traditional etiquette, even if it inconveniences guests.
Right.
So when we look at this group, careful, meticulous, scrupulous, punctilious, we see that attention to detail isn't a single trait. It can be motivated by wanting to avoid errors, careful, extreme thoroughness or fussiness, meticulous, ethical principles, scrupulous, or adherence to rules and formalities, punctilious.
Yeah.
A person could be meticulous in their work, but not scrupulous in their dealings, for instance.
That really clarifies why simply saying someone is detail-oriented isn't enough. The specific word you choose tells us why they focus on details and what kind of details matter to them.
It adds significant depth to our descriptions of character and work ethic.
Okay, let's shift gears again and move to how we describe social behavior and adherence to social norms or courtesies. We often group words like polite and courteous together. Our source gives us civil, polite, courteous, gallant, chivalrous.
This group describes different levels and styles of social behavior from the basic minimum right up to elevated ideals, starting at the low end, civil.
Civil often suggests little more than the avoidance of overt rudeness. The example is a civil reply that showed a lack of real enthusiasm. Antonyms are uncivil and rude.
So civil is really the bare minimum requirement for social interaction. It's simply not being openly offensive or rude.
Right.
It doesn't imply any warmth or genuine kindness or even good manners, just refraining from being actively unpleasant. You can be civil out of grudging obligation, really.
So just clearing the lowest bar of social interaction, what about polite?
Polite commonly implies polish of speech and manners, sometimes with an absence of cordiality. The example is a conversation as polite as it was condescending. The antonym is impolite.
Okay, this adds the element of learned manners and social grace. Someone who is polite knows the right things to say and do according to social conventions. But, as the source notes, this can be done without genuine warmth or sincerity.
Exactly. Politeness is often about adhering to learned forms of etiquette. It can be a performance. You can be perfectly polite while secretly or subtly being dismissive, as that polite as it was condescending example illustrates really well.
It's about the form, not necessarily the feeling. How does courteous differ?
Courteous implies more actively considerate or dignified politeness. The example is clerks who are unfailingly courteous to customers. The antonym is discourteous.
Here, we seem to add genuine intent or maybe a sense of respect. Courteous behavior isn't just going through the motions of politeness. It involves thoughtfulness towards others or is performed with a certain dignity and respect.
Yes, it elevates politeness by adding active consideration for the feelings or convenience of others, or by performing the action with a sense of dignity. It's politeness with a warmer, more genuine, or more respectful core.
So you can be polite but not courteous if your manners feel stiff or self-serving? Okay, what about gallant?
Gallant suggests spirited and dashing behavior and ornate expressions of courtesy. The example is a gallant suitor of the old school. The antonym is ungallant.
This sounds like a specific, maybe older or more performative style of courtesy, often associated with romance or formal situations involving flair or spirited action.
It brings in an element of style, perhaps theatricality, and often relates to a particular kind of charming or daring behavior, typically in social interactions, often towards women. Think of elaborate compliments or sweeping gestures.
Right. And finally, chivalrous.
Chivalrous suggests high-minded and self-sacrificing attentions. The example is a chivalrous display of duty. The antonym is churlish.
This goes well beyond mere social manners. Chivalrous implies adherence to a moral code, often involving honor, courage, protection of the weak, and respectful treatment, particularly in a traditional sense towards women.
Indeed. It's courtesy rooted in a deeper ethical framework and sense of duty, often involving self-sacrifice or upholding high ideals. It's a historical ideal of knightly behavior applied to social conduct.
So just being civil is the minimum required to avoid rudeness. Polite adds learned social manners, which might lack sincerity. Courteous adds genuine consideration or dignity to politeness. Gallant describes a specific, often spirited or ornate style of courtesy. And chivalrous implies courtesy driven by a high-minded moral code and sense of duty. You can be polite without being courteous or civil without being polite. These words show that social behavior exists on a spectrum of depth and motivation.
Exactly.
That's a fantastic breakdown. It makes you think about the intention behind someone's manners, not just whether they said please and thank you.
It encourages us to look beyond the surface form of politeness to understand the substance, or perhaps the lack thereof, behind it.
Moving from descriptions of people's behavior, let's look at how we describe the quality and character of things. We have many words for good or nice, but our source gives us choice adjecate, exquisite, elegant, rare, dainty, delicate.
This group provides a rich palette for describing different facets of quality, appeal, and value. Starting with choice.
Choice, as an adjective, stresses preeminence in quality or kind. The example is a choice bit of gossip. The antonym is indifferent.
So choice simply means it's the best of its specific type or category. A choice piece of steak is the best cut. A choice selection of books is the most highly regarded ones. It's about being top tier within its class.
Simple and direct. Okay. What about exquisite?
Exquisite implies perfection in workmanship or design that appeals to very sensitive taste. The example is an exquisite gold bracelet.
This sounds like quality defined by refined craftsmanship and aesthetic appeal, particularly to someone with cultivated taste.
Exactly. The focus is on the skill and perfection of its making and its ability to appeal to a discerning aesthetic sensibility. It's not just good, it's flawlessly crafted and highly appealing to refined taste.
How does elegant fit in?
Elegant applies to what is rich and luxurious, but restrained by good taste. The example is an elegant dining room with genuine French antiques.
Elegant combines luxury or richness with sophistication and tasteful restraint. It's opulent without being, gaudy or ostentatious.
Precisely. It's about wealth or richness presented with refinement and style, showing discernment and good judgment in its arrangement or design.
Okay. What about rare?
Rare suggests uncommon excellence. The example is drinking any but the rarest of wines.
Here, the scarcity seems to contribute directly to the perception of its excellence. It's valuable or highly regarded because it's hard to find.
Yes, the limited availability or infrequency is a defining factor in its perceived quality or value. Its excellence is underscored by its uncommonness.
Got it. Next, dainty.
Dainty suggests smallness coupled with exquisiteness. The example is precious, dainty food that leaves you hungry. The antonym is gross.
So dainty is a specific type of exquisite quality applied to things that are small and often delicate in appearance.
Right. It implies a charming smallness combined with refined quality or appeal. That precious, dainty food example captures the small, finely made, but perhaps lacking in substance.
Yeah. And finally, delicate.
Delicate implies exquisiteness, subtlety, or fragility. The example is, the play's delicate charm was lost on screen. The antonym is gross.
Delicate brings in ideas of fineness, subtlety, or vulnerability. It's a quality that might be easily overlooked or damaged if not handled with care, whether it's a physical object or an abstract quality like charm.
Indeed. While exquisite is about perfection and refined taste, delicate adds the sense of fragility, fineness, or a subtle beauty that requires careful handling or appreciation.
Okay, looking at these together choice, exquisite, elegant, rare, dainty, delicate monies. They offer distinct ways of articulating why something is valued or appealing. Is it the best of its kind? Choice. Is it perfectly crafted for sensitive taste? Exquisite. Is it luxurious yet tasteful? Elegant. Is its value enhanced by scarcity? Rare. Is it small and exquisitely formed? Dainty. Or is it fine, subtle, or fragile? Delicate. Choosing the right word provides a specific lens through which to appreciate the quality being described.
It moves us far beyond generic praise to highlight the specific attributes that make something special. It allows for much more nuanced descriptions of the material world and artistic creations.
Speaking of descriptions, let's turn to groups of people. Our source lists crowd, throng, crush, mob, horde. These aren't just different sizes of groups. They describe the nature and energy of the assembly.
Precisely. These terms differentiate assembled multitudes based on characteristics like density, movement, intent, and even perceived character, starting with the most general term, crowd.
Crowd implies a massing together and often a loss of individuality. The example is, a small crowd greeted the returning athletes.
This is the fundamental definition: a number of people gathered in one place. The dictionary adds the common observation that in a large group, individual identities can seem less prominent. It's a relatively neutral term describing a collective presence.
It's a gathering of people.
Right.
Okay. How does that differ from throng?
Throng strongly suggests movement and shoving or pushing. The example is, a throng of reporters followed the president.
So a throng is a crowd that is active, dynamic, and characterized by physical interaction, perhaps slightly forceful movement.
Exactly. It adds dynamism and implies a level of density where movement becomes noticeable or involves pushing past others. It's a crowd in motion, often driven by a common purpose, like following someone.
Right. What about crush?
Crush emphasizes the compact concentration, the difficulty of individual movement, and the attendant discomfort. The example is, a crush of fans waited outside the theater.
This word focuses on the physical experience of being in a very dense group. It's about being packed together tightly to the point of discomfort and restricted movement.
Yes, crush highlights the physical reality of a highly compressed crowd, where personal space is eliminated and moving is difficult or impossible. It's a word that conveys physical pressure and unpleasantness.
You can almost feel the pressure when you hear that word. How about mob?
Mob implies a disorderly crowd with the potential or the intent for violence. The example is hearing an angry mob outside the jail.
This word immediately signals danger and negative intent. It's not just a disorderly crowd. It's one that is unruly and likely to engage in destructive or violent behavior.
Precisely. The key elements are disorder and the presence or threat of violence. Using mob is a strong signal that the group is seen as a dangerous force.
And finally, horde.
Horde suggests a group of superior, rude, or savage character, often linked by common interests or problems. The example is a horde of shoppers looking for bargains.
This term also often carries a negative or derogatory connotation, suggesting a less refined or overwhelming group driven by base impulses.
Yes, horde implies a mass of people perceived as coarse, unruly, or even savage, often acting out of perceived self-interest or common problems. That example of shoppers, while perhaps less savage, still uses horde to imply a rushing, undifferentiated mass driven by the single interest of getting bargains, often without courtesy.
Right.
It can feel overwhelming or less than fully civilized.
These words offer a nuanced way to describe assembled groups beyond just size. A crowd is general. A throng is moving forcefully. A crush is densely packed and uncomfortable. A mob is disorderly and potentially violent. A horde is perceived as unruly, rude, or driven by less elevated motives. The same gathering could transition through these descriptions depending on its behavior, couldn't it?
Absolutely. A crowd waiting patiently could become a throng surging forward, and then a mob if violence erupts, or perhaps a horde if they behave with collective rudeness. It shows how the energy and intent of a group dictate the language we use to describe it.
And how much information about the group's nature is embedded in that single word choice.
Exactly.
Let's shift from describing groups to describing information itself, specifically how we summarize or present it in brief forms. We have words like compendium, syllabus, digest, survey, sketch, précis.
This set of words is highly practical for anyone who processes or presents information, offering distinct terms for different types of summaries or outlines. Let's start with compendium.
Compendium gathers and presents all the essential facts and details of a subject in concise or outline form. The example is a compendium of computer technology.
So the key here is comprehensiveness combined with brevity. A compendium gives you all the crucial information on a topic, but in a condensed, often structured, maybe outline format. It's thorough, but efficient.
All the essentials, but in a short form,
Yeah.
right? What about syllabus?
Syllabus presents a view of a whole subject, often as a series of heads or propositions. The example, of course, is a syllabus for a college history course.
This is a familiar term from education. It's essentially a structured overview of a course or subject, outlining the topics or arguments that will be covered.
Precisely. It's a framework or roadmap for understanding the scope and structure of a subject, often broken down into units or key ideas. It defines the boundaries and major components of the study.
Next, digest.
Digest presents material from many sources, arranged for ready and convenient accessibility. The example is a digest of world opinion.
The defining characteristic here seems to be that the information is compiled from multiple sources and organized for easy consumption.
Yes, that's crucial. A digest is about aggregation and organization. It brings together information from various places, articles, reports, opinions, and streamlines it for quick and convenient access. Think of periodicals that summarize articles from other publications.
So a digest is multi-source and curated for ease of use. About survey?
Survey is a brief but comprehensive treatment, often preliminary to further study. The example is a survey of current trends.
This sounds like an introductory overview, giving you a broad sense of a topic before you decide to explore it in depth.
Exactly. A survey provides a wide-angle view of a subject or field, covering the key aspects comprehensively but briefly. It's often used to give someone a foundational understanding or introduce them to a topic before they delve into more detailed research.
Okay. What about sketch?
Sketch is a slight and tentative treatment, subject to later change and amplification. The example is a sketch of the proposal.
This implies something preliminary, incomplete, and not fully formed. It's like a rough draft or an outline of an idea that's still being developed.
Yes, it emphasizes the preliminary and incomplete nature. A sketch is the initial, basic outline or description, understood to be fluid and subject to significant revision and expansion.
And finally, précis.
Précis is a concise statement of essential facts or points, often in the style or tone of the original. The example is a précis of the lengthy article.
This is unique. It's a summary that tries to retain the flavor or voice of the original text, not just the factual content.
That's the key differentiator. A précis is a rigorous condensation of the original material, focusing on essential points, but aiming to capture something of the original author's linguistic style or attitude alongside the information.
So in summary, to use one of the words, these terms tell us a lot about the nature of a brief document. A compendium is comprehensive facts, concise. A syllabus is a structured subject outline. A digest compiles from many sources for convenience. A survey is a broad preliminary overview. A sketch is a tentative, incomplete idea. A précis is a concise summary that keeps the original tone. Choosing the right word helps manage expectations about the depth, source, and purpose of the document.
That level of clarity is invaluable, especially in academic or professional settings.
Building on that idea of brevity, let's look at words specifically describing the quality or style of being brief. It's not just about using few words, it's about how you use them. The source gives us concise, terse, succinct, laconic, summary, pithy, compendious.
This section offers wonderful tools for anyone aiming for effective communication. Brevity can convey many different intentions or characteristics, starting with concise.
Concise suggests the removal of whatever is superfluous or elaborative. The example is a concise study. The antonym is redundant.
This is about efficiency through pruning. You are brief by cutting out anything unnecessary, repetitive, or that doesn't add essential meaning. It's brevity achieved by editing away the excess.
Efficiency by getting rid of fluff. Okay. What about terse?
Terse implies pointed, elegant conciseness. The example is a terse reply that ended the conversation.
This adds sharpness and impact to brevity. A terse statement isn't just short, it's intentionally pointed, often with a sense of abruptness or definitive finality.
Exactly. Terse suggests brevity with a specific effect, often sharp, impactful, maybe even a little clipped or curt, designed to make a strong point or end a discussion decisively.
Next, succinct.
Succinct implies precise expression without waste of words. The example is a succinct letter of resignation. The antonym is discursive.
This feels like economy combined with clarity. Using just the right words to be perfectly clear and precise, no more, no less.
Precisely. It's about verbal economy in service of clarity and precision. Every word counts, and only the necessary words are used to convey the meaning accurately and efficiently.
Getting maximum meaning out of minimal, well-chosen words. What about laconic?
Laconic suggests saying little, being reserved, indifferent, or mysterious. The example is a laconic people who are cold to strangers. The antonym is verbose.
This definition highlights that laconic brevity isn't just about efficiency. It can be a personality trait or convey an attitude. It suggests a deliberate choice to speak minimally, potentially because one is reserved, doesn't care to elaborate, or wishes to remain enigmatic.
Yes, the brevity is tied to the speaker's disposition or intent. It can feel abrupt, cool, or even intriguing because so little is offered. It's about saying little on purpose, for reasons other than just efficiency.
Next, summary as an adjective, as in a summary report.
Summary, used this way, suggests the statement of main points with no elaboration or explanation. The example is a summary listing. The antonym is circumstantial.
This is brevity achieved by boiling something down to just the core facts or main ideas, stripping away all supporting details or context.
Correct. It's the most stripped-down form of brevity, providing only the headlines or key items without any of the surrounding explanation or circumstantial details.
How does pithy fit in?
Pithy adds to succinct or terse the implication of richness of meaning or substance. The example is a play's dialogue studded with pithy one-liners.
So pithy is short, but packed with meaning, wisdom, or insight. It's brevity that resonates deeply.
Exactly. The words are few, but they are dense with significance. A pithy comment makes you pause and think because it contains a lot of truth or insight in a small package.
And finally, compendious as an adjective, related to the noun compendium.
Compendious applies to a treatment at once full in scope and brief and concise in treatment. The example is a compendious report.
So, something compendious covers a lot of ground, is wide in scope, while still being brief and concise in its presentation. It's broad coverage delivered efficiently.
Yes. It describes a form of brevity that manages to be comprehensive despite its shortness. It encompasses a lot of information, or many points, within a concise format.
This group gives us a fantastic palette for describing how information is condensed or delivered briefly. Are you brief because you've removed excess? Concise. Because you're pointed? Terse. Because you're economical and clear? Succinct. Because you're reserved? Laconic. Because you're only giving main points? Summary. Because your few words are full of meaning? Pithy. Or because you cover a lot efficiently? Compendious. Each tells a different story about the style and purpose of the brevity.
That is a powerful set of distinctions. It shows that being brief isn't a single act. The way you are brief adds a layer of meaning or describes a particular skill or intent. Using laconic for someone's response suggests something completely different than using succinct.
Indeed. It allows us to be much more precise when complimenting or critiquing communication styles.
Let's move to our final area, focusing on how we talk about verifying information and presenting evidence. How do we describe the process of proving something is true? Our source gives us confirm, corroborate, substantiate, verify, authenticate, validate.
This group distinguishes different ways of lending truth or legitimacy to statements, claims, objects, or documents, starting with confirm.
Confirm implies the removing of doubts by an authoritative statement or indisputable fact. The example is confirming reports of troop movements. The antonym is deny.
So confirm is about taking something that is uncertain or doubted and establishing its truth beyond question, usually through a definitive source or irrefutable evidence. It resolves ambiguity or skepticism.
Making sure something is definitively established as true. What about corroborate?
Corroborate suggests the strengthening of evidence that is already partly established or accepted. The example is when witnesses corroborated his story. The antonym is contradict.
So corroborating isn't proving something from scratch. It's adding additional support to an existing piece of evidence or a claim that already has some credibility.
Exactly. You're reinforcing an existing narrative or piece of evidence by bringing in additional supporting proof from a different source or angle. It makes the original evidence stronger.
Okay. Next, substantiate.
Substantiate implies the offering of evidence that demonstrates or proves a contention. The example is claims that have yet to be substantiated.
This sounds like providing the initial proof needed to back up a claim or argument that hasn't been proven yet.
Yes, unlike corroborating, which adds to existing proof, substantiating is about providing the necessary evidence to establish the truth or validity of a claim that is currently unproven or disputed. It's the act of providing the substance of the proof.
How about verify?
Verify implies the establishment of correspondence of actual facts or details with those proposed or guessed at. The example is verifying all statements of fact in the article.
This feels like checking information against reality or known facts to ensure accuracy. You're making sure something matches up with verifiable reality.
Precisely. It's a process of checking information or claims against known facts, records, or direct observation to confirm their accuracy and truthfulness. Think of a journalist verifying sources.
Next, authenticate.
Authenticate implies establishing genuineness by adducing legal or official documents or expert opinion. The example is experts authenticating the diaries. The antonym is impugn.
This term seems specifically about proving that something is real, original, or genuine, often using formal or expert methods.
Yes, authenticate is used for objects or documents to prove their origin, authorship, or reality, often relying on expert analysis, legal documentation, or official processes to confirm it's not a fake or a copy.
And finally, validate.
Validate implies establishing validity by authoritative affirmation or certification, or by factual proof. The example is validating a passport. The antonym is invalidate.
This sounds like giving formal approval or recognition of something's legitimacy, soundness, or correctness.
Exactly. Validate is about establishing something is sound, legitimate, or officially acceptable, often through formal certification, authoritative approval, or rigorous testing factual proof. You validate a theory through evidence, or validate a document through official stamping.
These words offer distinct ways to describe the process of proving truth or legitimacy. You confirm reports to remove doubt, corroborate an existing story with more evidence, substantiate an unproven claim with evidence, verify facts against reality, authenticate an object's genuineness, and validate something official or a theory for legitimacy. The differences are crucial in fields like journalism, law, science, and historical research, where understanding the type and strength of proof is paramount.
It's clear these aren't interchangeable terms. Using the right word precisely describes the kind of verification or proof being applied.
Indeed, it allows for much greater precision in discussing the reliability and basis of information or objects.
And how about bringing forward information or arguments within a discussion or debate? Our source clarifies with cite, advance, allege, adduce.
This final group describes different actions involved in presenting information or points for consideration, with varying implications about the speaker's stance or the information's certainty. Let's start with cite.
Cite implies bringing forward something as relevant or specific to an inquiry or discussion. The example is being asked to cite A single piece of legislation.
So cite is about referencing a source, example, or piece of information because it is relevant to the topic being discussed. It's presenting something as evidence or an example without necessarily deeply integrating it into a larger argument.
Referencing external information to support a point or answer a question.
Yeah.
Okay, what about advance?
Advance stresses the notion of bringing forward for consideration or study. The example is an idea being advanced as a theoretical possibility.
This sounds like proposing an idea or a theory, putting it out there for others to think about, explore, or debate.
Yes, it's about proposing something new, an idea, a theory, a suggestion for the purpose of discussion, examination, or potential acceptance. You're putting it forward into the intellectual space.
Next, allege.
Alleged often carries a strong suggestion of doubt about the validity of what is brought forward, or amounts to a disclaimer of responsibility for the assertion. The examples are the alleged perpetrator or existence, real or alleged, of ghosts.
This word is really important, isn't it? It signals that the speaker is reporting a claim made by someone else, but isn't necessarily vouching for its truth. It introduces the information while maintaining distance from its certainty.
Exactly. Using alleges is a linguistic signal that the information being presented is a claim that has been made, but its truth is unverified or uncertain, and the speaker is not personally guaranteeing its accuracy. It's crucial in reporting sensitive or unproven claims responsibly.
Using allege is like putting an asterisk next to the statement, here's what's being claimed, but don't take it as confirmed fact from me. And finally, adduce.
Adduce more specifically applies to bringing forth evidence, facts, instances, or arguments in support of a position or contention. The example is reasons adduced by those who doubt the reality of UFOs.
This feels like bringing forward specific supporting material explicitly to back up an argument or point that you're making.
Yes, adduce is about presenting specific evidence, facts, or reasoning in support of your own stated position or contention. It's about marshaling support for your argument. While cite can be general referencing, adduce is specifically about building the case for your point of view using presented facts or arguments.
So, when you cite something, you're referencing it. When you advance an idea, you're proposing it for consideration. When you allege something, you're reporting a claim with implied uncertainty. And when you adduce evidence, you're presenting it to support your own argument. These words are powerful tools for describing how information and arguments are introduced and what the speaker's relationship is to their truth or purpose.
That's a fascinating set of distinctions and vital for understanding communication, especially in formal contexts or debates. It makes you appreciate the care needed in choosing how you introduce information.
Indeed. These words allow for much more precise and transparent communication about the source and certainty of the information being shared.
Wow, that was quite a deep dive into the letter C. We started by exploring the subtle shades of quiet and troubled feelings, moved to describing confidence and attention to detail, looked at the many ways to describe social behavior, then turned to the language of quality and crowds, and finally explored the nuances of summarizing information, being brief, and verifying claims.
By meticulously unpacking these synonyms guided by our source, we've seen just how much rich detail and precise meaning is embedded in our vocabulary. These distinctions aren't just academic exercises. They equip us to understand the world, others, and even ourselves with greater precision. They empower you, the listener, to select exactly the right word to convey your meaning, avoiding ambiguity and adding layers of clarity and depth to your communication, whether you're describing a feeling, a person, an object, or an idea.
Absolutely. It transforms language from what might feel like a blunt instrument into a finely tuned tool. Choosing the right word can make all the difference in being truly understood and capturing reality accurately.
It raises an important question, though. If words that seem so similar, like calm and peaceful or polite and courteous, have such distinct meanings rooted in context, origin, and intent, how much nuance might we be missing or accidentally blurring in our everyday conversations simply by not pausing to consider these subtle differences?
Something to ponder as you navigate the fascinating world of language until our next deep dive.